Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Hashtag Leadership, What's on Your Mind. A very special episode today, and remember our aim is to add value to your leadership journey, whether we're bringing amazing guests on that have got amazing experiences and stories, or we've got experts in their field. So today we're speaking to Joe. How are you doing, Joe? You okay?
I'm doing fine, thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation.
Good, it's a pleasure to have you on. Joe is the founder of REEBOK and the author of the amazing book Shoemaker that came out in October last year. And we're going to dig into a little bit about the leadership side of that journey and some of the points that he mentions in the book. And we've only got 20 minutes. So Joe, just as an introduction, say hi and let us know where you are at the minute and what you're currently up to.
Hi, it really is interesting to do podcasts, and it's so different from my early days. So it's fantastic to be able to come on and answer a few questions about my journey. Right now, Julia and myself, we're living in France, and of course, for the last certainly the last 3 months and more, all we've been doing is talking about the book. And the book that took 7 years to write, but once we got it out, it's amazing how many people are interested in really the journey. Yeah. Because the journey itself, well, I think we have to really go back to where did REEBOK start? What was the family? The family of J.W. Foster. J.W. Foster, that's my name, and there were so many J.W. Fosters, but we start off with my grandfather. My grandfather, back in 1895, made for himself a pair of spiked running shoes. And in those days, spiked running shoes? What are spiked running shoes? Nobody knew. He's credited with either being the inventor or the pioneer. I prefer to say he was a pioneer because I'm sure other people were doing similar things at the same time. But what my grandfather really did that not many other people did, he knew how to sell his product. He knew how to influence people. And influencing today is one of the major ways of marketing. But in his day, you would wonder, how did he think that would? Well, he used to give the shoes to leading athletes. And of course, what happens when athletes see somebody else winning? They say, I must try a pair of Foster's shoes. And back in 1904, in his shoes, Alf Shrub broke 3 world records in one event, and that was in Glasgow, at Ibrox Stadium. During the first part of the 20th century, the first 10 years, he had many Olympic gold medals to his name. The second part of the second decade, of course, we had World War I. That took away the opportunity to make running shoes, but then in the 20s, that was my grandfather, and he was called Joe as well, Joe Foster. That was his belly pock. He had so many gold medals, and if you can, if anybody can remember the film Chariots of Fire.
Oh yes, yeah.
the athletes, which is Harold Abrahams, Eric Liddell, and Lloyd Burley, they won the gold medals in the 20s, and that film immortalized them. And my grandfather made those shoes. So we can go back to those days. But in those days, sport didn't really become fashion and become street. It was really in the 40s, late 40s, 50s, it started to become street. But my grandfather, he died in 1933. And I wasn't born until 1935. But by chance or whatever, I was born on his birthday. So grandmother seemed to have the last word on this one, and he's brought his name with him. So that's why I am called Joe, after my grandfather. And of course, I'm only 4, and we have World War II. But World War II, yes, at that time, what did we have to do? No lights, there's blackout. We could sit here and see the bombs dropping on Manchester. We were about 10 miles away. We were rather elevated, so we could see out over Manchester. We were in, Jeff and myself, we were in, Jeff, of course, my brother, who was our co-founder with me with REEBOK. We were in Scouts, first of all in Cubs, then Scouts. And that was a remarkable time to learn the discipline that you picked up in Scouts, because our Scoutmaster was a real thorough Scoutmaster. He made sure this just wasn't sort of time for play, this was time to learn. And so we did learn. We learned a lot of discipline, and that helped. But really, that sort of until I was 10 when the war ended. So it was just a normal kids bringing up the way you do. You get your sport and your pastimes. Really, in those days, it was at the local church. That's where you socialized. 17, and I joined the J.W. Foster Company, making running shoes. My brother Jeff, he'd been there since he was 15, so he'd been 4 years at the business, really, when I came in. But we only had 12 months, because by the time I'm 18, National Service called. And just by chance, both Jeff and I went together. He'd been deferred, but I went at 18. So this was 2 years away. Again, learning things. You're away from the family. You know, normally you get up, your mother's made you breakfast, she'll make you lunch or your dinner, look after you, washing your clothes and everything. You're brought up in that family environment, which is a protected environment in a way. And although we had Cubs and Scouts, and we did do some really good things with Scouts, it's in the book that our Scout leader, he took us over Helvellyn on New Year's Day, which was incredible.
A great adventure.
About a foot of snow, and the top of the snow was ice, little ice crystals, and we were in short pants. You know, we were in shorts, and it's like, when you look back on that, your legs were just dead. This was an experience in the Scouts. However, during National Service, fortunately, I could play badminton at a reasonable level. So apart from the discipline that you get again, you're away from home, everything's different, you're learning a lot. I played, for 12 months, I was more or less away playing badminton as against being in the RAF. And this was good fun. But Jeff and I, we both came back. I came back just a little earlier and back to the J.W. Foster's. And when Jeff came back, and we looked at this company, and we said, this is a failing company. You know, this is supposed to be our future, but it's failing. My father and uncle, well, unfortunately, they were running the company after grandfather had died, but they just didn't get on. They didn't get on at all. In fact, they were fighting more than they were working together. So it was a bit of a feud. In fact, Jeff and I had to pull them apart on more than one occasion. It was so bad. And we realized that how can we sort of get these people, father and uncle, to understand that we need to change this business? Jeff had been in Germany, he'd seen Adidas, he'd seen Puma, he'd seen what they were doing. And we come back to a company that was making the same product that was making in the 1930s. And probably even in the 1920s. It hasn't moved on. Volumes were reasonable, mainly because sport itself was growing, and it's always been growing. Yeah. Through whatever problems we've had in the country, sports has always continued to grow. So it was growing, and that was keeping them alive. But we could see it was a dying company, and it wouldn't be long before it went out of business. In fact, I said to my father, you know, we really needed to do something. And all he would say is, well, look, when I'm dead, when I'm gone, this will be yours and you can do what you like. And, you know, firstly, I used to say, Dad, number one, we don't want you dead. You know, we're not waiting for you to die. Don't give us that problem. But this company will be dead long before you are. But made no difference. So by 1958, Jeff and myself, we'd gone to college in the evenings to learn about shoemaking. But more than learning about shoemaking, we also picked up a lot of friendship, a lot of people, advice, somebody you could go to and talk to, and when we wanted anything. And it did was really good that when we did set up our own business, we could talk to people. Where do we get this? Where do we get that? And we always had that as an answer. But yes, it was 1958. It was November 1958 when I told my father, look, Jeff and I, we're leaving. And he didn't take that very well, but nothing really we could say about that. We'd offered so many times, why don't we set up away from Jedward Foster's, but he wouldn't. He was happy with what he was doing.
Can I
So
ask a quick question, just
yeah,
while we're at that early stage? So I always ask guests about where they, on reflection, or whether they were conscious of it at the time, and it's very much getting to that time of, where do you think your leadership journey started? Was it before you went into business? Was it during the military days? Was it even before then at Scouts? Where do you think that started?
well, you would call it leadership. In those early days, of course, I had nobody to lead, but I think it's
Exactly.
you're actually questioning what you're doing. Why are we here? What is happening? Why are we not doing this? Or can we do something different? Sometimes it's challenging the leadership that you might say you learn by challenging that you need leadership. You need somebody to sort of, not so much directly, but give you support. Someone, because you don't want somebody to tell you what to do all the time. What you need is somebody to ask you to do something, to sort of guide you in a direction, or allow you to go and be there if you need that help. I mean, it's different than being in the forces, of course,
Yeah.
where you don't question the orders. You're supposed to do it. Well, to bring out that leadership, I suppose, in the forces, you're trained to do that. But it's a specific sort of regimentation. You know, you don't go. You're not really allowed, and I don't think even in the forces, anybody who's in charge is really allowed to make their own decisions on how they will handle things. I think it's done by the book.
Yeah.
So I think it comes from within, that you're challenging, why are we doing this? When you feel that you should be doing something different, you feel you should be out there and doing things. So in those very early days, I think to an extent, and I wouldn't say I'm a great leader or a great salesman. I think a good leader needs to be a good salesman. I did my attempt at selling, but I knew my product, which I think is one of the best things. If you're going to lead anybody, you need to know your product. You need to know what to do yourself, rather than just be there.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that as well, because obviously it comes across a lot in the book about the strength of your brand and your knowledge, but also the people you surrounded yourself with. And it's interesting you say that about your link to leadership. But just tell us a little bit. I talk about being in like the people currency. You can't get to where you got to without having the people to go along with you and to lead and give them the ability to do what they were good at. So what's your sort of thoughts on the people side of where you got to where you did?
Well, as far as I was concerned, as we grew, and as I say, we set up Mercury Sports Footwear in 1958, and the story of how that changed is different. But when we talk about people, for me, it's a question that it's no use putting people in or taking people on who can't do the job better than you can. If you can find somebody to do it better than you can, then those are the people. Because if you can do it, you do it. And in order to expand, you've got to have different skills, different areas of technique, whatever it is. If it's in marketing or sales, or even in manufacture or design, you've got to take somebody in who can do it better than you. And that way you do gain, and the company is better for it. And certainly, people have to feel part of it. You've got to make people feel part. It's no good. You've got to listen. Being a good leader, you've got to listen to what people are saying. And it was always, for me, it was when we had people in charge, don't bring me your problems. I don't want to know your problems. I want to know your answers. And I will help. If your only problem is knowing which way to go with your answers, you've got two answers, come along, we'll talk, and we'll talk through which are the best to do. But don't just bring me your problem. Bring me your answers. And that way, people, that is the currency. They actually develop, and they know they can work and think about things. And it's only when it's a judgment. Which route do I take? Do I take this or do I take this? Not, I don't have anywhere to go. Which one? Then you're there to discuss and help. And if you all make a mistake, you make a mistake. But there's nothing wrong in making mistakes.
Yeah. Well, do you know what? That was
it,
another thing on my list that I was going to ask you. It comes across, and I've spoken to several people that have gone the full journey on this podcast. There's lots of people who listen who are on different stages of their leadership journey. But it came across to me in the book. I was going to ask about your relationship with failure, and about getting up and starting again, or the amount of times. And I love the storytelling element of this book because it tells you all the ups, all the downs. It's not just a successful brand. It's not just happened to come across it. So tell us a little bit about your relationship with failure and how you deal with that.
Well, failure comes in many different ways. We started off as Mercury Sports Footwear, and we couldn't register the name, so we had to go through changing our name, and that was a process. And the agent who we were working with said, "You've got to change your name, but I don't want one name. I want a dozen." And that sort of phases you quite a bit, because how do you give somebody a dozen names when that's going to be your future? And as you read in the book, I had won a dictionary during the war in 1943, and it was an American dictionary. And in that dictionary, I like the letter R. So I'm thumbing through and I came across REEBOK, REEBOK, a small South African gazelle. Brilliant. And that I put at the top of my list, and went to the agent and said, "Look, I don't care about these other names. I want that one, because we've got to be in love with this. This has got to be our passion. We've got to want this." And as it happened, REEBOK was the only one that came out, and that was fine. But 4 years into our journey, our silhouette, our stripes on the side, we had two stripes and a T-bar. And it was 4 years into this that Adidas wrote to us and told us we were infringing the 3-stripe registered mark. And we were delighted. This is fantastic. Adidas have recognized us. We're there. They were the biggest in those days. They were absolutely top, way beyond. But okay, they feel it necessary to write to us. So yes, we had to change our silhouette, which we did, to the vector. You can see it at the back here. We changed to that, and we're very happy with that. So was that luck? What was it? Something happened that they felt it necessary for us to. We were infringing in the. And we hadn't got the money to fight that. We didn't want to go to court and say, no, ours is a T-bar. So it was simpler to change. And we were delighted with the change on that as well. So quite often you get faced with problems. And it's a question of, if a problem gets you down, then you're in trouble. What you've got to look at a problem, it's an advantage. How do you turn it around? What do you do to turn something around? We had a very simple problem that we're getting a lot of letters back at one point that we made cross-country shoes, and we made them with blue suede leather. And these letters were coming in that some of them from the wives of the runners, that the feet had turned, not only feet, the socks had turned blue. Because most of us had a pair of white socks, and the socks had turned blue. And we got all these letters. And I was thinking, why has this happened? We've been making this shoe out of this leather for a long time. Went back to the tannery to say, what happened here? They apologized. They said they'd forgotten, or they hadn't washed out the excess dye when so we wrote to all the people and said, in fact, we even put an advert in the papers saying, if you have socks turning and blue, let us know. So, and what we did, we said, look, next time we'll buy a pair of shoes from us, we'll give you a 25% discount. And we did send them all, I think I was sending them 2 pairs of socks. So anybody, we sent them 2 pairs of socks, but we sent them blue socks.
Oh, brilliant. I love that. How to overcome a problem. But that just shows the mentality that you had to deal with failure as well.
Yeah, I mean, but it was a simple problem, that one. We had lots of other problems. And as you go through my book, I went to America. I needed a bigger market. Athletics is a small market in the UK. Was in those days, a bit bigger maybe now, because running now is coming. But America was big. Every college, every university, they had coach. And coach was God. And you could go to college for an athletics scholarship. And so this was a big market. So it was 1968, the Board of Trade in our government decided that they wanted sports businesses to export. And this turned out to be the right time because I wanted to do exports. And they paid for us a stand, the return our first, and half of our expenses when we were out there in America. So fine, the only downside of it was in Chicago in February. And Chicago, February, it's minus. You've probably got 20 degrees of frost. It really is cold. That was the only downside. Otherwise, yeah, fantastic. I didn't do too well at the first visit, but I kept going. And I must have had 6 or 7 different distributors. I picked them up at the exhibition. Yes, we'll do it. And or they try, or they were part of the athletics community. But everything failed. But it was a question of who's the next one? And keep going, keep trying again, because you're getting nearer to success. But it was 11 years. It was 1979. And that time, a lot of things had happened. But by 1979, I managed to pick up Paul Fireman. He was a distributor of outdoor camping goods in Boston. I like Boston. Boston's a nice place. And we were in Bolton, so only 1 letter different from Bolton to Boston. But over that period of time, what had happened, and which was fortunate for us, okay, we'll say universities, colleges, good market, but running became a vast category. It became really big, and it started off very late in the 60s, but during the 70s, it grew tremendously. It grew with the magazine Runner's World. And Runner's World, I think Nike really grew off the back of that. I think if it hadn't have happened, I don't think Nike would have grown the way it did do. But running happened, and it became the biggest sport really in America. That is, people are really just buying a pair of shoes and going out running. So participation-wise, it was really, really big. And Runner's World started rating shoes. So if you were the #1 shoe, but that was a big problem. That was really bad, because in America, the volumes that they sell over there are tremendous.
Yeah.
And if you were #1 shoe, everybody wanted that shoe. Well, you just couldn't produce enough. Nike couldn't produce. It takes you 6 months to gear up to that sort of volume. And by that time, everybody's thinking about what's the next shoe. So the retailers are really getting hot under the collar. This wouldn't do. They were left with a lot of stock. In the first place, they couldn't get it. And then at the end, they were being left with stock because a new shoe came in. So he changed to star ratings. So instead of there being one #1 shoe, if you got 5 stars, you were a #1 shoe. And there could be 3 or 4 shoes that got a 5-star. And this was good. I mean, we knew about this. And I designed a shoe that specifically to really get a 5-star rating. And we tested it out in Edmonton at the Commonwealth Games. We got numerous gold medals. We did really well with that shoe. And February 1979, I was at NSGA show. And Kmart, you may have heard of Kmart. They're big distributors, almost just trying to think what it'd be like a big superstore throughout America. And they wanted to buy 25,000 pairs of shoes, but they wanted a better price. Well, I knew both things would happen, that if we got a 5-star, the volumes we needed would go through the roof. Our small factory couldn't do it. So I had an arrangement with Barter in the UK. They would help. But I also knew to get a better price, whilst Barter were better than we could actually do it in our factory, get a better price, you had to go to the Far East. So those are the things we knew. And Kmart, yes, we could have dealt with Kmart, but just didn't feel right. Paul Fireman, mall, wholesaler, he knew the business, he knew America, and that's where we went. And that is where we really took off. We made it. And
again, I love that part of the book as well, because, and again, you mentioned about the time scale. I love reading and sharing these stories, because on the face of it, we see success, don't we? We see success, we see a global brand, and it's amazing the amount of time that goes by. For example, before you were even called Reebok. We're talking years and decades of progression and progress and failure and getting up and doing something about it. So we're coming to the end. I've added a little bit of time on because you're such an amazing guest and I love hearing your stories. Can I just finish with one question? So like I mentioned before, we've got lots of people listening who are on different rungs of the ladder on leadership. What would you, a bit of advice for somebody to level up their leadership in their business, in their personal sort of leading themselves or leading a team? What would your couple of bits of advice be for people to level up their leadership?
Well, I think with leadership, you really have to be focused. You really have to know where you want to go. And if you've got that focus, you can then pass that on to other people. But I think it's also picking the right people, choosing those people. I think you've also got to listen to those people and make them feel part. I think if they're part of what you're doing, then that makes them grow and they grow with your business. In fact, they probably help you grow if they're not make you grow. Sometimes, and I mean, we did have people in REEBOK who probably took us faster, farther and quicker than I could. But you've got to give them the platform to do that.
Yeah.
And if they have that platform and that encouragement and know that there's somebody they can turn to, and then you're the leader. You're not always leading out front. You can lead from behind because you've got some good people and you don't get in the way.
Yeah.
I think you've not got to get in the way. You've got to let them. And okay, sometimes they may leave your company, but they will have learned an awful lot.
Yeah. And again, just thinking about, there's a couple of great examples in the book about how you really had people, when you had to lay people off and they were offering to come in and work for free just to be part of that journey. And that just shows the culture and the environment that you create behind that brand. And it comes from the leader and the people in charge.
Yeah, well, we didn't stand away from them. We were part of. I was quite happy to repair some sewing machines, as well as go out there and try and sell the shoes. And so you talk to your people. You know, these were work people. They were not people doing marketing, or these people were making shoes. But you could talk to them, and they could talk to you. They could call me Joe. We were not that big. We were not sort of far away. But I did learn a lesson from. And he's in the book, John Willie Johnson. Johnny Johnson, really nice fella. And he had a large factory in Bacup, which is Rossendale Valley. And I've been there a few times, but I went in once and he showed me through. And he talked to everybody and he knew the names. He knew the names, and I'm looking amazed because he must have had over 100 people that he just spoke to. He said, "Hi, so-and-so, this is Joe." And I was absolutely amazed at that you know, he knew all the names. And I think we had 20, 30 people, and I could remember their names all right. But again, I mean, I wasn't in the factory after, well, I'm saying about 19, in fact, after 1975, 76, I was out on the road, traveling, whatever. I'd gone away from the factory. But it was those days, those early days, yes.
But I suppose that's when you build the culture and the environment that allows you to go off and leave. So that's obviously your positives, that you've left the people and the environment that are going to be, you're not going to have to feel like you have to drop in all the time. But so Joe, we've come to the end. I could speak to you all morning. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you guys have enjoyed this episode, make sure you hit subscribe on your podcast provider, or if you've been watching us on the YouTube channel, and make sure you hit subscribe, and you'll hear and see all the podcasts coming out in the next coming weeks, every Wednesday at 6 a.m. Make sure you hit the link below. There's going to be a link there for the book itself to go and purchase that. And so that just leaves me to say thank you so much, Joe, for your time this morning.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure. And let's say this is where we're going. We're driving this book to become a #1.
And we'll help you on that way.
Yeah, that is my challenge at the moment. Yes.
Excellent.
So thank you very much for the invitation.
Good, that's no problem. It's my pleasure to host you. And make sure, guys, that you go and check out my vlogs I've been doing every Monday at 6 a.m. as well. Okay, see you all next week, guys. Bye.